Welcome everybody to our online webinar to outline our shared Meat Livestock Australia Integrity Systems Company and Food Agility CRC initiative. My name's Dave Lamb. My background is that I've been leading collaborative R&D projects for the last 26 years in precision agriculture, including precision livestock management. I spent my entire working life in and around CRCs. What I've learned from my experiences to date is that we still haven't quite got the recipe right when it comes to collaborative R&D with impact. And that's what this call out is all about. For my sins, I'm presently serving as the Chief Scientist of Food Agility CRC, a CRC which I'll introduce a little more shortly. I'd also like to introduce my colleague, Julie Petty from Meat Livestock Australia. Julie is an experienced project manager who's worked across a number of portfolios since joining MLA nearly 7 years ago. Julie has a strong background in goat meat production, has worked on topics including food fraud and traceability technology solutions for exporters, and is now working with Integrity Systems Company on traceability and verification technologies. Julie's got notable experience in adoption and extension, developing industry strategic plans, industry consultation frameworks, and communications. Now, Julie and I will be hosting this particular webinar, but behind us is a team of colleagues from Integrity Systems Company and the CRC. Now, before we get cracking, I'd just like to cover off on some housekeeping. This session is being recorded, and ultimately we'll make this recording available to you via a YouTube clip, and we'll send a call out through the email and social links we already have with you in registering for this webinar. If you have other colleagues that you think have not registered that may be interested in seeing this presentation and involving themselves in the Q&A, then please forward the original call out link to them and they can register after the event. We certainly welcome questions, so please use the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screens. Don't use the chat tab. It's the Q&A tab that we can watch and provide feedback to your questions. Whilst it's not possible for you to ask questions of us directly during the webinar, if you do log your questions on the Q&A tab, we have a team behind the scenes who are working through them live. Any questions that you pose that we believe warrants a personalised answer, we'll send back via a direct Q&A answer to you. Anything we receive from you that's recurrent in nature or that we think is worth showcasing to the broader audience, then we'll bring up for discussion at the end. Importantly, if you have any questions or issues you'd like to raise that you believe may be sensitive in nature to your business, to your IP, then we encourage you to contact us directly following this presentation. And at the very last slide, I'll point out to you who those key contact people are. Okay, so what we'll do now is that we'll start our presentation with you. So we'd like to introduce to you our initiative, which is known as Digitally Enhanced Australian Red Meat Integrity System. Myself, of course, I'm David Lamb, and you'll be hearing shortly from Julie Petty from MLA Integrity Systems Company as well. So we're going to work through a bit of a structure for this webinar. I'm going to give you a very brief introduction to our CRC, Food Agility. Julie is also going to tell you some important background in relation to Integrity Systems Company, which effectively feeds into the rationale for offering this call out. We're going to go through an overview of the intended program of work, what the program's about, the nature of our 3 challenges, and give you some insight into what we would believe to be the ideal project proposal. We'll work through with you the application process and timeline, and then there'll be an opportunity for Q&A. But if you do have questions, please start filling out the Q&A tab now rather than leaving it to the end, as we may run out of time to address all your questions at the very end. Our aim is to close up the webinar at 1 p.m. our time, 12 noon in Queensland, and of course 10 a.m. in WA. Let me tell you a little bit about Food Agility CRC. First of all, we have a mission of unlocking the power of data and digital technology, and importantly, with research to create a sustainable food future for the Australian agri-food sector. Now, it's probably not lost on you that there are 6 CRCs in our Cooperative Research Centre program that are directly linked to agri-foods, and we are one of them. We're not defined by a particular thematic area. In fact, we define ourselves by the parameters under which we operate. And that's where the word agility comes in our name. So certainly where digital, data and technology features in empowering our future agri-food system and driven by research, that's where we sit. But the agile process is a key part of the way we do things. And we'll tell you a little bit more about that as we move on. Our main objectives, as I mentioned, it's about unlocking the power of data and digital, and in doing so, unlocking the power of research. We have impact imperatives that drive us forward, and that is delivering return on investment to our partners through the power of digital, backed by research. Sustainability is absolutely critical for us, and it's empowered by our mission, Food for Life, that we recently launched earlier this year. And at the end of the day, we're about transforming the R&D ecosystem. And that's where the introduction of agile processes comes in. So at the end of the day, the 2 objectives that matter to us are unlocking the power of digital and data and research empowering business. Now, I'm labelling those points because they are a critical feature that we believe will be in the projects that we will back in this shared endeavour with Integrity Systems Company. Now, I'm just going to hand over to Julie, who will introduce you to the Integrity Systems Company background.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks very much, everyone, for joining us today. Really excited to see how popular the webinar has been for everyone. As Dave said, I'm now working for the Integrity Systems Company, have been for a couple of months now, looking at this traceability space. Dave, if you could jump onto the next one, thanks. And there should be more text coming up on that one. Thank you. Cool. So a little bit about Integrity Systems. So we are a wholly owned subsidiary of Meat and Livestock Australia. As you can see, we look after a range of different products and programs within the food traceability or red meat traceability space, including the NVDs, so National Vendor Declarations, our NLIS system as well, which covers red meat, so cattle, sheep and goats across the Australian industry. You can see there that we have approximately almost 200,000 producers in the system who are logging transactions through our system when they're transferring livestock from one location to another. About 20% of the consignments, as you can see, are transitioning across to the ENVD platform, which means still that 80% using the paper-based NVDs to support those transactions and movements. And about 73 million movements last financial year as well, so on a huge number of devices. So I suppose the point of this is really to highlight that there's a huge number of data points across the entire platform and a huge number of producers and industry stakeholders that we're dealing with on a daily basis. Our goals for the system going forward are very much that we need, well, firstly, the system has to be super easy and simple to use. And there are a variety of investments underway, sort of making those changes as we speak. We need to provide value back to our industry participants. So not only are we supporting market access into a variety of different export markets that Australian produce and products go to, but we need to provide better day-to-day value proposition for our end users as well, so that the system is multifunctional and can help them in their day-to-day business. And we also know that consumers are actively seeking out more information and seeking out specifically Australian red meat across some of these export markets as well. So very much fits in with our overarching goals of where we'd like to see the system heading. That's very much been, I guess, part of the driving force in putting these tenders together. And Dave, if you'd like to pop along to the next slide, be great, thanks. And again, thank you. So obviously the red meat industry is an extremely high value industry for Australia and particularly to our red meat exports as well. What we're seeing here is that we've got a collaboration happening between ourselves and the Food Agility CRC. We've run a series of initial workshops with different stakeholders over a range of, I suppose, topic areas of interest, and tried to flesh out exactly what we think the gaps are within this traceability space that we think potentially a call could go out to respond to, which is obviously how we've now come to this point. So we have some information there about, the total amount of funding that's available. So it's an up to amount. And I don't know, Dave, if you want to talk more specifically about funding splits and how that works.
I'm happy to do that in the next couple of slides, Julie.
No worries, cool. Okay, well, with that in mind, we might maybe move on to the next one, if that's all right, please. Okay, so we've got some information here around the 3 separate challenges that have gone out in the terms of reference for people to respond to. So the first one, of course, is around this real-time animal identification and tracking. This one's very much on-farm focused, and we'll go into that in a little bit more detail in a moment. Challenge 2 is very much looking at residue detection. This is both on farm, so in a proactive sense, the producer being able to more easily track and identify animals that have had different treatments. And then in a reactive sense, perhaps a test or something that someone further along the supply chain could potentially run on the live animal as well. So a processor, for example, may find this of interest if they're looking to do a random audit or test on animals coming through to double check that the information that's been recorded on the MVD was in fact correct. That's particularly important in terms of our market access, because obviously animals treated with different agvet chemicals and that type of thing have withholding periods and export intervals that are quite important to some of our export markets, and the repercussions for sending incorrect product to the incorrect market are obviously can be quite expensive and ongoing. Our third challenge is looking again at this traceability aspect of individual animals, and that's looking particularly at genotyping. So we'll go into those in a little bit more detail now. Dave, if you could pop along to the next one, thanks. Should be a bit more text on that one too, thank you. So this challenge is very much looking at real time, and by that we mean within 24 hours, identification and tracking of individual animals on the property. We know there are some systems out there that are already working in this space and have had some good wins in terms of things working on the ground. We're very much looking at, I guess, not reinventing the wheel with this call, but we want to look at the tracking and tracing of individual animals. At the moment in our system, we can trace a tag as it goes through the traceability systems, but what we really need to be tracing is the animal itself. We want to be able to build on the work that's been completed to date and look at, the longevity of the device that might be applied or used on the animal as well. We need to look at advantages and value propositions for the entire supply chain that comes through from this. So as we are able to track and identify and trace an animal live on the farm within that 24-hour period, what value adds does this then create further down the supply chain, not just for the producer as well? So we're quite interested in what that looks like. Whatever the system is, it needs to be able to be easily integrated into our existing programs, such as the NLIS, and any software programs or herd management programs that the producer might be using on their farm as well. The key thing here is that it needs to be easy to use. The data and information coming back for it needs to be reliable. And what we want in the end is for this information to be aggregated in a way that's going to make it actionable for the producer. So in the longer term, as a producer, I'd love to see from this that I could be able to identify as the animals coming up the race that this particular one, when I've scanned the tag, has been jumped through the fence and has been hanging out at the local tip or the farm dump, potentially therefore having a higher risk of chemical residues, or it might have jumped to the fence and got into the neighbour's cropping paddock where they might have had to apply different agtech chemicals to that crop as well. That then may lead to a withholding period that I would not otherwise be aware of if I hadn't had that information coming up as a red flag in this system. So I think as a producer, that would be, for me, a good outcome and a good time-saving exercise where that kind of information could be flagged as it's coming, the animals coming up the race. The key thing too is that it needs to be a cost-effective option for the producers. So in the end, our key questions with this one are, well, which animal is it? Where's it been? What's it doing? And those need to be questions, I guess, that we are able to answer in a commercially relevant and cost-effective type of way. Otherwise, our challenge will continue to be adoption of within this space. I don't know, Dave, if you'd like to add anything else there at all, but
no, thanks, Julie. When I outline that, what a good project could look like, I'll mention the interconnectivity about various links in the chain.
Cool. The other thing I think we need to note with this one is that ideally a good outcome for the producer will be that there's minimal infrastructure needed to be implemented on the farm. So that comes back to the cost effectiveness of the option. We want to be able to link it with those existing management and animal husbandry practices, and through whatever sort of system the producer might be using on their farm or program to track that at the moment, which leads back to that in being able to integrate and interface with other different data systems. Obviously, we'd like to highlight benefits that we can generate in terms of, time saving on the producer's behalf and reducing things like human error, that type of thing when data is being populated into the NVD, which will then, in the end, we hope, help improve compliance requirements and actions that need to be taken, and it becomes a much more seamless and easy to use operation for the producer. So Dave, if we pop along to the next one, thanks. So challenge 2, as I mentioned, is about proactive and reactive. From a proactive perspective, and I guess to outline the whole purpose of this call more fully, is that I think upwards of 70% of Australian red meat is exported. Some of those markets that we send product to will not accept product that has, or animals that have had any hormone growth promotants used, so HGPs used at any time during the animal's life. Therefore, it's very important, for example, to be able to identify and segregate those animals, because their products can only be sent to particular markets that therefore will accept HGPs. The same can be said for things like veterinary chemical treatments, that type of thing. So there are different withholding periods and export intervals that the industry needs to be extremely conscious of when deciding what product is exported to which markets. As I mentioned before, the implications, if there's any sort of errors as this system comes through, can be extremely costly and have a long-term reputational impact for the red meat industry. So those are obviously the kinds of challenges that we're wanting to avoid, and we're thinking that there's a couple of ways that this can be tackled. Firstly, we need to have an easy to use and easy to implement system on farm for the producer to help support them in just eliminating the possibility of human error and being better able to identify animals that have had particular treatments, that type of thing. By that, we mean essentially that in terms of that particular subset of the project, you'll be able to look through and identify, well, what sort of granularity of data will the producer need to know when they're going through looking for these types of things to reduce their on-farm risk, and being able to really accurately complete that NVD as it's coming through when the animal is being transferred off the farm. We need to, through this project, we'll be very interested to explore and quantify the cost of something like a false positive or a false negative in the system as well, because that will be enable us to have a more articulate conversation around, well, you know, this is the kind of risk that we're actually looking at if we don't get this kind of thing right. Definitely need to look at things like adoption challenges within the industry as well, because obviously there's a whole pile of challenges, which I'm sure a lot of the audience will be quite familiar with, including connectivity, but also, you know, for the producer, is this easy to use? Is the value proposition for me super clear? Because I might feel that the system is working pretty well at the moment and I keep pretty good records, so why would I care? So we need to be able to really flesh out and articulate well the value proposition for the producer and other parties along the supply chain when we're talking about this one as well. And we really like to see with this one trials and demonstrations looking along the lines of the whole supply chain and the kinds of benefits that we're able to identify for different parties along that supply chain as we're going through. We'd really like to see with this one and with Project One, the solution embedded within the business, so that we can, you know, really embed the learnings and knowledge with that end user, which in some cases is the producer, so that they, you know, walk away at the end of this project with a really good understanding of what they can do with this information, how they can use it, and how this will assist them going forward. For the second subset within this project is looking at the reactive side of things. So obviously, you know, mistakes do happen, unfortunately, and occasionally animals may come through where there's been a mix-up, and the animal might have a HGP, or it might have jumped the fence and hopped into the neighbour's cropping paddock, and there may be a chemical residue there with that animal that the producer was just not aware of to then note on the NVD. So as a processor, I think I'd be quite interested in being able to verify this if I so wished, and for the producer as well. So if there was an on-farm or in-plant test that we could potentially use on a live animal that will help us determine whether or not that animal is at higher risk. So it may, whether or not it has had a HGP treatment or it has any residue issues that we need to be aware of. This will help, I guess, be another layer of insurance for parties along the supply chain to then be able to identify, hey, that animal might be higher risk. I'm going to keep that one back until I can figure out what's happened there, or till the withholding period has elapsed. For that one, I think we're very much looking for what's the desirability, viability, and feasibility of the treatment, of the detection process. There might be various options that we need to investigate, so it'd be good to look at, okay, what are the promising solutions there, and go through a prioritisation process to decide where we'll go to from there. Again, looking at that cost of false positive, false negative within the system, and what does that then mean for the industry and the application of the detection or the test. We need to look for that one in particular at what level of sensitivity the test might require. We might need to prioritise the different residues, etc., that we might need to look at by species as well to have that capability and be targeting, I suppose, the most higher risk treatments that might be out there that could jeopardise our export markets. We're definitely looking at what kind of learnings potentially have already occurred within other industries, perhaps such as pharmaceutical, where we can take some learnings across into our industry and see what we could potentially adapt for our needs. So if we want to hop along to the next slide, thanks, Dave. So the third challenge is a bit simpler, to be honest. So for this one, we're very much looking at, okay, if we're going to have lifetime identification and tracking of an animal, and we wanted to be able to, we're taking, for example, genotyping information already through a stud process or on a stud farm, that type of thing. How else can we be using that information? And so the question here then becomes a bit of a scoping exercise to see exactly, well, what would be involved if we were to roll out a genotyping program across the Australian red meat industry, specifically with the purpose of traceability in mind. What does that look like, and what might be the costs associated with that? So can we use the samples that are taken for multiple purposes? What's the scalability, the timelines of the response? How long would it take us to get a sample tested and get the result back for us then to be able to action and mitigate potentially further damage within an export market? What might be the cost, for example, of us storing all of these samples for the lifetime, of those animals? So there's a whole variety of questions there around, well, exactly how feasible is using genotype to solve the question of traceability? We'd very much like to look at, as I mentioned, storage options, risks and cost. What would we be storing, and what might that look like? And I guess whether or not in the end, as I said, this is a feasible option. So I think that's a bit of a summary of those for you, Dave.
Thanks, Julie. So noting the backdrop of our 3 core challenges, let me tell you a little bit about the profile of a project that we're looking for. For starters, this is really about starting with the end in mind. So there are 3 key ingredients to our projects. One is the researcher. The other one is a tech or digital delivery partner, and the other one is the ultimate end user. The priority of influence starts at the end and works backwards. So in other words, at the end user, I'd use this aspect of digital tech in my business if I only knew or had this. The tech digital delivery partner is another key ingredient. I can deliver this service technology both as a pilot, which is absolutely important to this particular call out, because we're looking at pilots in a project to show that it can be done, but then at scale post-process. So this isn't just about backing a startup. We want an organisation that is going to be capable of delivering this post-project and at scale. And of course, the critical enlivening ingredient to it all is the researcher. The researcher will be able to answer those mission critical research questions in the project so that the tech delivery partner can deliver the pilot solution and ultimately to the industry more broadly post-project, that solution, the one that's needed. So the end starts from the right and works to the left, and the outcome, of course, is aided and abetted by the tech delivery partner and the end user, but really springs from the knowledge outcomes of the researcher. And in this particular call out, Food Agility and MLA will team up, and we will cover 2/3 of the cost of the project. The expectation is that the project team finds the other third. Skin in the game is important, but so too are knowledge outcomes. So what are the sort of ingredients of a perfect project? Ultimately, we want proposals that demonstrate a genuine collaboration between technology, research, and industry partners. Now, in our experience in the CRC, our most successful projects to date have been those where the project manager is actually the ultimate end user. They might not be doing all of the work, but they're continuously and consistently driving the elements of the project with that end in mind. It's not always the case, and it doesn't have to be the case, but that's just our experience today. The inclusion of an end user and a technology delivery partner and research partners are obviously the mosaic we're after. And as I mentioned, we're willing to back 2/3 of the eligible cost of the project, but we're looking for co-investment for that missing third. Clearly, the involvement of an end user or red meat supply chain participant is really important. There may be a proposition that focuses on a challenge that's on farm and even a technology that can deliver something on the farm. But that challenge exists for a reason, and it may not just be about solving a problem on farm. It may be around animal performance. Why is it important? Because it may then feed into the ability of that animal to meet spec when it moves into the feedlot or when it moves into processing. In other words, that other value chain participant, not just on farm, is really important because that sets and enshrines the context of the project. And by having them involved in the project from the get-go means that that end in mind is loud and clear to all. So something to consider is the involvement of an actor, an influencer in the project, that's one other link further down the value chain from the immediate area or the particular location in the value chain that the project may wish to focus. That is a really clear signal to us of that impact pathway. And clearly the tech partner or the data partner is a really important part. And as I mentioned earlier, it's not about getting behind kickstarting a new idea or a startup. We're looking for participants who are relatively sustainable. They're in the scale out phase. They've got a stable business model. We would see the IP generated by the project sitting in the hands of that partner who is most likely to commercialize the outcome. Sure, there will be licensing available to the other participants, clearly, and where the knowledge comes from has to be absolutely recognized and valued, and there has to be licenses to continue developing that knowledge and so forth. But at the end of the day, for this impact to be achieved, it really is about getting the outcomes into the hands of those out there in the value chain that will be able to commercialize it and deliver the solution to the ultimate end users. In recognition of the key value of the research, we would expect to see a bulk of the project expenditure being spent on the research side. Clearly, that we would expect a technology partner and the end user has a challenge that needs to be met, and the researchers are critical to that. So we'd see 75% of the budgets of the eligible project expenses being directed towards those key knowledge creators in the project. We would expect to see the projects run using agile principles. And that really is about that constant feedback loop and active engagement of all of the actors, the value chain actors in that project team together. This is not about funding researchers to disappear for a year or 2 years and come back with a solution and a report. This is about constantly testing and piloting the ideas live. What's being learned is being fed into the tech or the data partner, which is being handed on to the end user. And that constant feedback and iteration process to work. And it obviously has to demonstrate value for money. Otherwise, the challenge may not exist in the first place. And we'd see a time limit, a maximum time limit of approximately up to 2 years. Now, interestingly enough, when we first launched this call out, we received quite a few emails and calls from people that said, hey, we've already done this. Well, my question to you is, why are you here? You don't need us, move on. This is about collaborative research with end users who have a challenge, with technology data partners that can help deliver it, and by unlocking and delivering that key new knowledge. If this has already been done, then you don't need us and you don't need this call out. I guess I would argue if it's already being done and we can't see it in the marketplace, well, why is that? But that's okay. If we're told, but there are no research gaps, we understand the challenge already. So again, why are you here? Why aren't these solutions, or why isn't this knowledge being put to work in the marketplace? If you're an end user that has already got the best solution for your business in action, then again, why are you here? You don't need us. Don't let us get in your way. So I hope you can take my point here that this is not necessarily just about doing what's being done. And as Julie mentioned earlier, if it's being done, we would expect to see a good, thorough proposition, including due diligence around, well, this is being done and this is what is unique about this proposition. But having said that, if there is a challenge that is still here today with end users, with our delivery partners, and there is missing knowledge, we want to hear from you. So let me tell you a little bit about the application process. Now, we do have a website, foodagility.com. Please note, no.au, so it's foodagility.com/projects. And if you just scroll down off the top of the page there, you'll see the big red call out box. That's going to have everything you need for the call out. There'll be a project application, we call it a project plan, and a project budget spreadsheet template to complete. What's probably a little different, you may have already noticed, is that our application form is in fact a PowerPoint deck, not a big Microsoft Word document. So that PowerPoint deck will step you through the process. And in fact, at the very end of the PowerPoint deck, there is a one-slide summary called a lean canvas. Now that's the view of the project world in a single eye grab. And you'll notice there are some links which will direct you to how to in terms of the lean canvas. But ultimately that lean canvas is a summary form of everything you will have done as you work through the project deck. And as I mentioned, there's also the project budget spreadsheet. Bear in mind, think about your partners. Think about the involvement of those key actors. Think about your co-investors, because there is a missing bit that we'd like to be brought forward in the proposal. So think about, if you are a knowledge provider, then think about, well, who would deliver that to the marketplace? What would the tech or data partner look like? And of course, at the end of the day, who is that end user? Who will slap the table in our investment council meeting and say, I need this solution delivered by this partner using knowledge created by this team. So those three components are absolutely important for you. What will happen is, once we hit the close date of the applications, we will look at the proposals, and we will bring teams in, if necessary, to assist with any refinements and co-design. So if your application is close and we're excited about it, but hasn't got quite everything we need, that's okay, because we'll bring you all in. At the same time, we may find that there are applications from a number of groups that, while good, are missing something that another group could bring to it. And we would offer you the opportunity to join a broader team to bring it all together. But that will be on you will elect to do that. We won't bring you in without asking anybody permission to do so. So like I said, we will contact those that we're interested in hearing more from, and maybe working with them to refine your proposal if necessary. If there are missing elements, we'll offer you the opportunity to maybe join a room with others that have got like missing elements but fill other gaps, to see if we can build a stronger proposal together. And again, that is an option that we will make available to you. Now we're going to split those workshops up per challenge. So what I'm getting at here is, if you select a challenge and you proceed with your application, just put a diary blocker in for either 11th of December, 14th of December, or 17th of December, depending on the challenge, in case we have an opportunity to all come together to do that co-design workshop. So they're the dates, 11th, 14th and 7th, and they're Australian Eastern Daylight Saving Time. 1:30 to 4:30 for the 11th and 14th, 9:30 to 12:30 on the 17th. Now, all of this information is covered in the material on that website, foodagility.com/projects. And the estimated timeline here, the application window will close on the 24th of November, 5 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Saving Time. So please note that. Our aim is to spend about 10 days going through the applications, and we'll be in touch with teams that we'd like to work more closely with. That window, the 11th to the 17th of December for our Agile Project Co-Design phase, really important to us. We would envisage that we would spend that Christmas silly season and into February and maybe early March into the final contracting, because we recognise there are sensitivities and pragmatic issues that you have to deal with when you bring the end user, tech delivery partner, and knowledge creator together in a room. There are all these issues around IP, commercialization, right to use, and so forth. So we've got a little bit of time in there for that as well. And we would envisage kickstarting our projects by sometime in March of next year. Okay, what I might do now is we're available to look at some question and answers that have come through. Now, bear in mind, don't use your chat box if you don't mind. I'm like a goldfish, I've only got a couple of moments now. The Food Agility team, I assume, has answered questions, 27 of them. So thank you for those. And there are 3 questions that are left open that I'd like to just to paraphrase to you all and give you some comments. So the first question was around challenge 1, which has the word tracking in it, okay, which generally means finding location at all time. Well, not necessarily. And the question goes on to say, however, there are a gamut of measurements you could also acquire specific to an animal, and many of them associated with the NLIS, that's the National Livestock Identification System tag, the button tag in their ear, and analyse them over time for insights of performance and optimise food intake. Does this fall within the core? Okay, tracking could be real time, and we define real time as is information and data put to work within, say, a 24-hour period. Now, that may be live. That's something that's blipping off tags or sensors every couple of seconds, every minute, or they could be latent. It could be that's collected and collated and put to work before the end of that 24-hour period. So we'd like to leave it open. It's not about live tracking. It could involve latent data, but at the end of the day, it's that 24-hour window that we've set the benchmark around. Julie, did you want to offer any comments on that one?
No, I think that's a really good summary, Dave. So definitely within that 24 hours, as I said, we're looking at, there's a few examples in the terms of reference about how the producer might use that tracking information. So.
Cool, thanks, Julie. If that raises further questions, please, I encourage you to fill the Q&A tab. Now, there's another question here in relation to, I guess, my reference to that sort of eligible project expenditure and the focus of sort of the 75% mark on the research side. And the question was about, and I'll paraphrase it, the major challenge with many research initiatives, especially once a proof of concept is complete, is scaling up and operationalising the good ideas. Correct. There is often a lot of testing and refinement required by operational expertise, not researchers. Absolutely. With the requirement of 75% to be spent on new research, this becomes a constraint, meaning these great ideas never may be operationalised in any reasonable time frame, or at least can't benefit from this program. Is there any intention in this or a future program to make it more focused on the rapid tangible outcomes by adjusting down this 75% requirement? Good question. So for a start, remember that the tech delivery partner and or the end user will be involved actively in the pilot project from day one. So there'll be some immediate preparation, live preparation, as some of the knowledge findings have been put out. Now, it could be that the primary challenges are around the tech delivery side that need to be answered by the researchers. It could be the bringing in of a new technology to enliven another aspect of an existing tech delivery service. So at the end of the day, we certainly have got a guideline around 75% eligible expenditure goes to the research team. I guess by implication that 25% can go to the technology team to get their systems armed up and to be able to deliver through that pilot. So that's what we've set. Look, we're certainly open to a conversation around that. But at this stage, so don't be afraid to bring it to us if we require a further balance. But like I said, remember, all of those 3 elements of the project team will be working from day one. There shouldn't be a part of the team sitting back waiting for something to be delivered 6 months into a project. So we'd be certainly keen to look at that. And noting the agile delivery mechanism of the project, you know, the project can flex within the boundaries of that shared team portfolio of work and deliverables in order to meet the challenges and opportunities the projects throw up. Julie, any comments?
No, I think you've done a good job there. Thanks, Dave.
Cool. Next one. For challenge 1, how many messages per day do you anticipate? I believe I've answered that. Like I said, we set the notion of real time for the purpose of this call out to be that 24-hour window. It can be live data or it can be latent, but put to work within 24 hours. What are the large number of devices identified in challenge 1? Is the next question. Would dare to dream. Remember, we heard that, you know, Integrity Systems Company has a massive capability around the NLIS system, for example. And maybe there's an element that a role that sort of platform, that sort of data may play. So there is no limit. There is another one here that says that, are you assuming that the researcher and tech provider could not be one and the same organisation? It's a really good question. I guess from a CRC perspective, we're not necessarily interested in building research capacity in business. Our primary agenda and what the Commonwealth has funded us to do is to unlock the power of our research sector to make them, or to put them into service for our industry. And it's about research empowering business. So it could be argued that if a business wants to build their own research capacity, then there's plenty of other investment opportunities to do so through venture capital funding, for example. But having said that, I recognise that you cannot have the researchers working in isolation, doing their research, and you can't have our delivery partners working in isolation as well, doing their own research, because often there is a disconnect between what keeps those two drivers going in those two different organisational sectors. What we're looking for is that partnership in this particular call out. There is another one here. Are you seeking one or multiple projects per challenge? Notwithstanding the opportunity to bring multiple submissions together if all agree. The answer to that is we would welcome any number of proposals from the same organisation. We would encourage any number of organisations for a single proposal. So dare to dream, team. And like I said, if it turns out that there are some wonderful ingredients in a proposal but are missing others and they are being held in another, we will offer the opportunity for all to come together on your terms to see if we can do it. And the last question I've got live at the moment is, should traceability primarily focus on MSA standards? No, it doesn't have to at all. At the end of the day, this is about, and we saw that wonderful ISC roadmap, literally a roadmap, but a connectivity diagram. Think of all of those value chain actors and what's important to them. It could be a feedlot that's worrying about or wringing their hands over finishing cattle under feed regimes to meet a processor spec. What early insights can they get from animal data collected on a farm? It's not just about tracking animal behaviour in a feedlot. It could be something on a farm. Or it could be some attribute of the way the animals and the landscapes and their environment interact, feed straight into the chemical residue issue that Julie mentioned earlier. So it's not just about MSA, but there are so many things that can be enlivened by that connectivity. Now, there's a question here. Would the CRC and MLA able to look at APR, intern PhD placement program? What this person is referring to is the fact that there is a government scheme available whereby PhD students in particular can be hosted at universities or can be paid for by government to be embedded with industry. It's a really good question because we can answer that in more broad terms. The CRC, our CRC, is launching our own industry HDR program. So for example, if in a proposal, there is an opportunity to host PhD students with those organisations, the end users that are enlivening the power of data and digital, the tech delivery partner who's looking to develop and deliver a solution to the end user, then we would be very keen to look at opportunities to provide and to facilitate HDR scholarships in that space, having them hosted by the research partner that's the anchor of the project. So if you do see an opportunity or you wish to offer an opportunity to host a HDR student within the project, embedded with the industry partner or end user, we have our own program that we'd be very interested to discuss with you. So yes, please flag them. And in fact, I believe under the research challenge slide, if there's not a question about do you see an opportunity to host HDRs, please note it and bring it to our attention, as we're very interested to follow up with you. Julie, did you want to have any comments at this stage?
No, I think it's, yeah, depending on the, I guess, the application, which project you're looking at, you can certainly apply for one or all, or in terms of project 2 or challenge 2, sorry, you can apply for part 1 or part 2. You're certainly not restricted there in terms of what you are looking at. And again, we're very interested in, I guess, seeing a team that can come together who's got, I guess, that on-farm, in industry experience that can link through to some of the guys who've got the knowledge and experience around, you know, data management or technology innovation, that sort of stuff. But it always needs to come back to ease of use and how that end user is going to use that.
Thanks, Julie. Okay, so just a couple of last questions that have come in. IP ownership, will it be a three-way split, MLA, Food Agility and the research partner? No, as I mentioned earlier, we would be particularly keen to see the IP rest in the hands of the party most likely to commercialise it. And indeed, a key part of the pilot structure of the project is providing that early evidence that the form factor of the transfer of the data and digital solution to the end user is developed and is shaping up to be applicable. And that's the notion of the agile, and that the research knowledge creation side is capable or is in the right form factor to feed in. So not necessarily, and in fact, sure, if there is challenges around IP ownership, then maybe there's an opportunity to put it in trust between the partners. But like I said, our aim here is to get it in the hands of those who can put it to work, because the project will demonstrate it in pilot form. And when the project's over and we all leave the field, we'd like to see it in the hands of a stable environment to be delivered with those participants and grow out, scale it up and scale it out. Now, there's a couple of questions here. Specifically for challenge 3, can the cost of generating and storing genotypes and also storing DNA samples be considered cash and cash contributions towards the 1/3 component? That's a good question. And at the end of the day, there are eligible project expenditures that are critical to the conduct of the pilot of the project. And there are other expenses around infrastructure that may be around framing up the organisations to deliver at scale-up phase. So what I'm getting at here is, rather than give you a straight answer as it is eligible cost, is that we would be willing to look at that. That's something we're open to, because we do recognise, especially in the genotype one, that that's primarily one of the reasons that the marketplace price pointing of that sort of technology is currently where it is today. So if there is something that comes up that can break that impasse and make it available to more broadly, then we'd consider that. I've just got a couple more coming in, noting the time here. We are a producer working with with a number of technology partners. I'm just reading this ahead. Okay, so sure, great advertorial. If you do have technology you'd like to offer into projects, then my advice to you, rather than advertise it with us, is to think about those partners, the end user, and the research knowledge gaps. Remember, if you've got a solution out there already, looking for an end user, you don't need us. If you're an end user using a solution already and don't think you need another, you don't need us. If you're a researcher that's got a mortgage on all the questions that you think could be answered in the next 20 years, you probably don't need us either. So bear in mind that three-way mix, because our aim here is to break the impasse.
I think too, Dave, it's if there are producers or processors or feedlots dialed in listening today who are quite interested in these projects and perhaps may have a supply chain, a commercial supply chain that they are a part of, that may be interested in trialling some of this stuff. So being the on-ground test bed for this, please do get in touch with us as well.
Thanks, Julia. Good call. So it could be that you are an end user that we don't know about, or have a challenge that no one knows about, tech delivery op, marketplace, the knowledge creators as well. So please take this as an opportunity to reach out to us as well, because it may be that your pain point can be met with other ingredients that are coming before us. And at the end of the day, impact is by having a reason to do something, and you're the reason for doing it. So thank you.
That's right. So we'd very much like to have you involved right from the get-go in terms of exactly what your expectations would be, what you would need out of this process, what kind of problems do we need to solve for you in your business.
Yes. Now, I do have one particular technology base that's been brought to my attention that is worth a flag, because it's not tied to any particular individual business. Remember, you may have heard Frontier SI 2 weeks ago gave a national update on the space-based augmentation system, which is a major national Commonwealth initiative around bringing effectively sub-meter and, dare I say, moving towards centimetre position technology into the hands of all. That's a federal initiative. If you are interested in that opportunity, then I commend you look at the space-based augmentation system, SBAS, and Frontier SI. So like I said, that's not an individual business. That is a national initiative that you may find could feed into a proposal. Now, there's another one here is, can hospitality and restaurant industry professionals participate in these projects, or reach out for help to solve their challenge? Absolutely yes. And at the very end of Julie's roadmap that was put up, the all-important consumer. It's around provenance, it's around food safety, it's around creation of new markets for our product. So absolutely, if you're at the consumer end of the spectrum, may not be directly connected back to farm or even feedlotters or even processors, but if you're at the consumer end of the spectrum or the marketplace end, then we would absolutely dearly love to hear from you.
I think the key question there would be around what kind of traceability information are you chasing that you need in your market, because that will help us inform us about the type of granularity and information we need to be collecting back on the farm gate.
Yeah, excellent. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've got 2 minutes to go. I believe that we've exhausted your questioning at this stage. I just wanted to share I guess that in the final throw, just to remind you of who our contacts are. So if you do have any inquiries of a technical nature, for example, noting Julie's role in Integrity Systems Company and MLA and her experience, then jpetty@integritysystems.com.au. If you have any queries about the process that I outlined myself earlier and the process moving forward, Magella Nolan, who is based here at Food Agility CRC, is available to answer those questions. Magella.nolan@foodagility.com. Remember, no AU, it's foodagility.com. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attention. We really look forward to hearing from you. If you do have any questions, or you certainly have questions that you believe may be of a sensitive nature, please reach out to Julie and Magella. It will be treated in confidence. We do look forward to seeing your applications, and we certainly look forward to seeing you in the co-design phase as we move forward. So thank you all for your time.
Thank you, everyone.